I'm Dr. Alan Perel, and this is Conversations in Medicine. This program brings cutting-edge medical topics to the Staten Island and tri-state community. Today's program is about traumatic injuries. One of the most common and misunderstood areas of traumatic injuries are car accidents. If you were hurt in one, what do? We see a lot of information and false information on TV ads. Tonight and today, we're going to clean it up. We have some wonderful guests here who are expert in this field, they're very knowledgeable, and really to help the Staten Island and the tri-state community understand what to do if you're in an accident. There's so many misconceptions, and we really want to bring this to light. My guests today are Charles DeStefano, an attorney on Staten Island and in Brooklyn, who's the past president of the Staten Island Trial Lawyers Association, and Dr. Charles Fundaro, a chiropractor who specializes in spine and traumatic injuries and is the present president of the Kings County Chiropractic Association. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
In New York State, there were approximately 300,000 car crashes in the year 2015. 9,000 of them were considered severe, 16,000 moderate, and 79,000 minor. A lot of people get into accidents and a lot of people get injured. What I'd like to start out with Mr. DeStefano, who's knowledgeable about the laws and what rights you have. They use the concept of something being no fault. If you're in a car accident, isn't it always someone's fault? Somebody got hurt. My patients who I see in the office will describe how someone might have done something, gone through a light, gone through a stop sign. But the words that we use are no fault.
Yeah, I find myself explaining that to clients almost all the time. But in fact, the term no fault was established in the 70s after the court system had been clogged with cases with minor injuries. So for example, pre-no fault, you could have a minor fender bender, you could have a bruise on your pinky, and you can then proceed to a full-blown case in the state Supreme Court. So the courts were overwhelmed. So the legislature got together and said, you know what, we have to do something about this problem. And they established no fault by saying, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. That's the proper term. Regardless of fault, okay, you will be covered under no fault insurance, which covers you for a number of things. There were if you were a pedestrian, if you're a passenger in a car, a driver, if you're on a bus, if you're on a bicycle. Okay, those are the scenarios in which you'd be covered under no fault. Because motorcycle accidents were an incredibly dangerous mechanism, the legislature had to carve out motorcycles because almost every time there's a motorcycle accident, it's never pretty, and people are injured severely. So they said, well, we won't allow those people to use this pool of no fault. Okay, they'll have to get their own insurance. So that's how no fault was established.
So that's the privileges or the rights you have when you're in a car accident or involved in a motor vehicle accident. So now I'll ask Dr. Fundaro, if someone's in an accident, what do? If you feel hurt and you're sitting there in your car, what do?
Well, hopefully somebody will call the police, and then emergency medical services will arrive, and you'll be assessed at the scene. And if need be, you can be transported to a hospital emergency room where you should be checked out, examined. Radiographs would be exposed if need be, to rule out fracture. And then they'll probably give you an NSAID or a muscle relaxer and send you on your way. Or if the injuries are more severe, you'll be admitted. And then you'll be referred to the appropriate specialists.
So if you're in an accident and you're not feeling well, the recommendation is to seek medical attention.
Absolutely should be checked out by the people, the emergency medical services.
What if you get home, and many of my patients who I see and your patients who you see feel an hour or two later they were in a state of shock, the epinephrine was pumping, they didn't realize how hurt they were. What if you get home and then you feel it? Does that mean your right's gone?
No, of course not. And it's very typical that occurs often, that the problems become worse even hours later, day or two later. Then you go to the emergency room, you get checked out appropriately, and then you go to the appropriate specialists.
So the emergency room or the urgent care center or your internist or your regular doctor, whoever you go to, is going to guide you into what to do.
That's correct.
So if you have a fracture, many times you'll see an orthopedic surgeon.
Right.
If you've had head trauma or concussion, someone like myself who's a neurologist.
That's correct.
If you have a pinched nerve, there's chiropractors, physical therapists, orthopedists, neurologists. A lot of different specialties take care of different
Yes.
things. Once a person is out of that urgent situation, how do they know where to go?
Well, typically they'll go to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor will treat them for neck problems or low back problems, and then he will refer them out to the appropriate specialist. If there's, for example, a headache, then they're going to see a neurologist. Or if there's radiating pain down the arms or legs, then they're going to see the neurologist. And then we do nerve testing, and we do magnetic resonance imaging, MRIs, and so on.
So it's a whole process, and the process is to get someone well.
Correct.
I mean, the idea is not to over-test people, it's just to get someone well.
To see what the projects, to get the extent of the damage, to label it, and to treat appropriately.
Because cars are big, they move quickly, and impacts are pretty devastating, even with airbags and
Yes.
seatbelts. And I've had so many patients tell me the seatbelt sometimes hurts more, but it's better to
Absolutely.
have had the seatbelt on, as New York State law says.
Absolutely. We have plenty of people who complain that the seatbelt grabbed them, and they have pain in the chest and the sternum from the seatbelt. We also have patients that are struck in the face by the airbag. And sometimes it's a low-impact collision that maybe didn't require the airbag to deploy, and they end up with TMJ problems and neck problems from that. And sometimes they get burned as well.
And that's what I was going to say. The chemicals in the airbag oftentimes will leave a chemical burn on someone's face. So it's interesting. So now going back to the legal aspect of all this, you get to the urgent care center, you get to the hospital, you get to the doctor, you get to someone who might be able to treat you. Is there a time that someone should consider getting a lawyer?
Yeah, I wanted to add something else to this because you asked before what no fault meant. But I just want the audience to know that the term no fault also means just because you may or may not have been at fault doesn't mean, let's put it this way, you don't always have a case per se. But you will always be covered for your medical expenses and other things, which we can talk about in a while. But the first thing that you should do, and I'm a holistic lawyer, if you will, I believe that people should be contacting a doctor first, a chiropractor first. Dr. Fundaro is correct. I think that the first line of treatment you should get, it would be chiropractic, because the type of treatment they're going to get is going to give you more immediate response to your injury. So typically someone will see, let's say, Dr. Fundaro first, and then they'll realize that no fault just doesn't happen by magic. You see, you actually have to put this into motion, and nobody contacts you, generally speaking, from your own company and says, oh, I heard you were in a car accident. It doesn't work that way. You need to have some connection to your own carrier, which would be your no-fault carrier, that is facilitated through your lawyer. So people will find out. They'll go to Dr. Fundaro and they'll say, well, you need a claim number through no fault. Well, how do I do that? Well, you need a lawyer. And then that's how someone would find an attorney has that type of experience and understands how these forms have to be prepared, where they have to go, and how quickly they have to get out. They have to be sent within 30 days, and that was passed. That was legislation and a regulation rather that came about. How many years ago was that? No fault reform, quote unquote.
Maybe 10 years
It used
ago
to be, much
A long
longer.
time ago.
30.
Used to be 180 days.
Yeah, it was much longer.
Yeah.
So now they've really been very restrictive. So you're injured. You've just been in an accident. Your car could be mangled. Your body can be mangled. And you're not in much of a position to be thinking about forms. So that's why I always tell clients, look, you need one less thing to worry about. Let me take that out of your hands, and we'll prepare that. We also have to prepare what they call an MV-104 civilian, which looks just like a police report that police fill out. They actually call it MV-104 also. But you need to put your version of what occurred in it. That has to be sent to Albany. So there are a couple of things that need to take place to protect your rights. And I also tell people when they come in, listen, I'll help you with the no-fault forms, and I'll process this. I'll do the MV-104. I'll let your insurance company know that in the event the other party is not insured, you could still have a case through your uninsured motorist protection. I'll do all these things. But the caveat is, I'm going to look at your case if it's a soft tissue injury. You don't have a fracture, you don't have a loss of an organ, you don't have death, loss of fetus, serious and obvious scar. You have a soft tissue injury which falls into a special category. I'm going to help you, protect you, but in 90 days, if you get better in a month, 2 months, what am I going to tell that client? Well, a lawyer should tell the client, I'm glad you're feeling better. You don't have a case. Health is the most important thing in our lives. A lawsuit is not. And I know that coming from a lawyer, it's strange, but that's the truth. That's the way it should be.
There are patients that just don't meet threshold.
Correct.
So let me just add a little bit to what I've heard so far, and just explain it to you. So no fault. So even if it was, I know it was my fault, I'm still covered for my medical care.
The exception would be if you're found to have been driving while intoxicated or under the influence of drugs. Other than that, you remember that Rolling Stones song in which Mick Jagger says, I ran 30 red lights in his honor? I don't know if you remember that. You could run 30 red lights, okay, and I'm not suggesting people do this, and do 120 miles an hour blindfolded. If you hit a tree, you're injured. You get no fault,
Right.
okay, because they want, and by the way, this occasionally happens, but I'm going to tell you how all-encompassing no fault is to protect citizens of the state. Let's say you're a pedestrian in Manhattan typically, and you're hit by someone who leaves the scene. You live in an apartment building, you don't have a car, you have a child, a teenage child, they don't have a car, a spouse that doesn't have a car. You would think, uh-oh, I don't have no fault. No, you do. It's called MVAC, an acronym which may take me 20 minutes, Motor Vehicle Accident Indemnification Corporation. What does that do? It's a state agency. It's like a safety net for those people. Even those people who don't own a car, who are pedestrians with no known source of no-fault insurance, their no-fault comes from MVAC. So every person in this state is guaranteed protection under no-fault law.
And that's marvelous. I don't think people know that. The idea that if you're in a car accident, involved with a motor vehicle accident of some kind, that you have some protection. And that's very nice. Because some people are afraid to go to the emergency room. Some people are just afraid. They don't really want to make a big deal about things. They're worried about losing their job. And we could talk about that later, how as an attorney you help someone who can't go to work and things like that. We were talking a little bit before, and I just want to add a little bit from a neurologist's point of view, that there are orthopedic cases that patients, they go directly to their physical therapist. There are a lot of different modalities of rehabilitation. Chiropractic being a major one, physical therapy, acupuncturists, pain management people. So I think the idea of finding the right fit for yourself and who's going to take care of you, and someone who has that, who's really the captain of the ship figuring it out, whether it is the chiropractor, the neurologist, the orthopedist, is really crucial.
Well, we work together.
And so often, and so often, one specialty can't do everything. Because when you're hurt, it's not just one part of your body. And sometimes you might just break a finger or hurt your finger, but at most times more things are involved. So we've got nerve issue, bone issue, joint issue, all kinds of other different issues that are there. So let me go back to what we were talking about before. You go through this system, and the system lasts how long?
Well, it could be as little as 3 months. It could be many years. There's no limit on their benefits. What some insurance companies try to do, though, as Mr. DeStefano said before, is they try to limit you by having an independent medical exam. And this is how they can cut your treatment short. This is how they can stop their losses for paying the providers and stop the testing and so on. But there are ways around that. We try to treat a patient till they have been as close as possibly restored to their pre-accident status. So if you can do that, then you've done the right job. But sometimes in the 3 months or the 4 months before when they do an IME, an independent medical examination, you can't do that. So you have options. Sometimes we'll take a lien on a case and continue the treatment. Sometimes we'll arbitrate the case and so on. Or if there's been a denial from the insurance carrier, you can ask the patient if they want to use their own private medical insurance. So these are the ways we continue treatment if needed.
So if someone needs surgery, someone has a major injury, is that covered also? I mean, is this
Yes.
unlimited?
No,
what they'll do?
Actually, Dr. Fendaro is correct that it lasts up to 3 years, and the minimum policy is $50,000, although I strongly advise our members of the community to go to their agents and say, get a supplemental policy. It's pennies. And it'll get you a policy up to $150,000. So if you do suffer a severe trauma and you need surgery, it can run. That $50,000 goes pretty quickly. In fact, that by now I can almost calculate the amount of days someone's admitted to a hospital and the type of treatment. And I'll tell a family, you're running at a no fault in about 20 days, 15 days, it depending on their injury. The question also poses, that you're posing me is, what does it cover? So yes, that initial ER visit, it covers the ambulance as well. Ambulances are $850 to get from you, wherever you are, to a hospital. It's expensive. They'll prescribe, muscle relaxants or,
NSAIDs.
anti-inflammatories.
NSAIDs are like Motrin-like medicines.
Those are covered, okay? But when you go to Dr. Fendaro's office, for example, he is paid through no fault. That's covered. You mentioned other modalities, which, by the way, if you don't mind me saying, I think it's very important that the viewers understand that chiropractic is an incredible way of not having to take an opioid. And we all live in Staten Island, and it's the scourge of opiate abuse begins with people who are injured in an accident. And if they go to a physician who says, here, take this oxycodone, because you have severe pain, that's not always the best option, as you discussed. There are options. Personally speaking, I think chiropractic is your best primary option to get you out of your bed, off your couch, and moving. And then you're covered under physical therapy, acupuncture. You'd be covered under these other modalities. They've all been brought in. If there have been other innovative modalities that no fault and the state insurance department will acknowledge.
Right. Pain management.
Pain management.
Epidural steroid injections.
Trigger point injections.
Ablations.
These are things that, if this was 50 years ago, we would be limited.
So almost anything that your doctor thinks is reasonable within medical practice,
Yes.
will usually be covered.
And you're covered for your lost earnings.
So let me go into that a little bit more. Say someone isn't able to go back to work. How do they figure out this is all through the attorney, how do they figure out what to do?
Again, I believe that's why you need an experienced personal injury lawyer versus a lawyer who does many different things, because these are the nuances that happen when an accident occurs. So someone said, I'm physically unable, and a doctor rather says, you're physically unable to perform this job. Let's say it's a strenuous job. Let's take someone who does construction, and they have to do a lot of heavy lifting. Now, typically, Dr. Fendaro would see this patient with some lumbar issues. You should probably say, you should not, because you'll have long-term problems. Let's stick with me for a while. So he'll have to come up with an employer's wage verification form. And what that says is that ABC Corporation is his employer, his supervisor will fill it out. It's a very simple form, but it has to be done, again, within a certain period of time. That is submitted to no fault along with Dr. Fendaro's note, a disability note. It says, I strongly urge that this patient does not return to work because he'll be further injured and he's disabled, and typically give a period of time, because that patient will come back after a month and say, how are you feeling? And that's submitted to no fault. No fault will honor that. And a $25 a day miscellaneous expense, which covers things like, if you've seen commercials, oh, we'll even pay for your dog walking. Well, in fact, that's true. If you are someone, let's say you live alone and you can't walk your dog, but you're bedbound, who's going to do that? You could pay someone up to $25 a day to clean your home, walk your dog, just about anything that is causally, that's connected, I should say, connected to what your daily activities are.
So that'd be like household help, special transportation.
To and from a doctor.
Yes.
What if you could do some work? What if you could do desk work, but you can't do heavy work? What happens to someone like that? Does your employer force you back into certain ways or
No,
not? What rights do you have?
Again, it goes back to deferring to your doctor, your chiropractor.
So what typically happens is most jobs will tell you that if you can't come back and do your job, then don't come back. Very rarely these days is it easy to get a job to accommodate. And that's just the way it is. You know, most jobs do not want to make accommodations. Come back when you're ready to do your job, full duty, without restriction.
Interesting. And it's interesting because you and I have a number of patients in common, as we have all of us and around the borough. And as a neurologist, I see so many things that are sometimes a little bit different. We see patients who come in with head trauma, and oftentimes people with head trauma will have the lingering effects of head trauma, these post-concussion syndromes lasting for a very long time. We see people with neck and low back injuries, and we usually don't get all the tests the first day someone comes in.
Right.
We want to see how someone does, and I think I describe it to people as if I did an X-ray of everything that hurts you right now, you'd glow. So, and even if we did an MRI, you'd be in a machine for 2 days. So we try to focus on what's the urgent issue initially,
Well,
and then over time, over the first few weeks, figure out what is the lingering or persistent problem.
Right, so that's probably why most of the no-fault carriers and workers' comp carriers as well want you to wait about 30 days before you do an MRI. They feel that if it was emergent to do the MRI, it would have been done in the emergency room where they could do it immediately. But typically, we have to wait the 30 days before we order it, or the MRI center will not honor it. They won't actually get paid for it if they do it sooner.
Yeah, they'll be denied.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's interesting. It's an
So
interesting,
there
it's a difficult
is-
system to navigate.
So basically it's a plan. You know, initially we'll do X-rays in the areas where we feel that are required. It's required to do them. Rule out fracture to see if there's any changes in joint function and so on, and then we'll treat, see how the treatment goes, and then we'll order the MRIs as appropriate, or we'll send them to a neurologist to order the MRIs of non-spinal areas like the brain and so on.
So it's interesting. So it's a difficult system, of course, to navigate, and that's what we always see with these type of things. So tell me, so in a typical day, when someone comes to you, do most people know about their rights, or is it a difficult issue to be able to explain to someone?
Yeah, I find that most people don't know their rights, and the ones that do, if they know how to navigate the system, then they probably don't need me. But I like to think of everyone as, you know, they have a first timer, they have no knowledge of the law, they have no knowledge of applying for no-fault benefits. So I will treat them and give them the attention that they need. I usually reserve about 45 minutes between my paralegal and myself to go over what the benefits are and ultimately what my plan is. Because just like a chiropractor, a neurologist, when someone comes into you asking your professional opinion, you should evaluate it, you should have a plan. Everybody wants to know, well, where do we go from here? So I say I have a plan A, a B, and a plan C. These, you know, I will be able to explain to you from the beginning the entire gamut of a case, quote unquote. I also have, getting back to no fault and people injured and then heal, or, well, the first thing I try to establish is, were they at fault? If they're at fault, but they're injured, they may not, doesn't sound like they'll have a case. That's okay. I often process those forms too, as a courtesy. I'm not looking towards a case. I'm doing it pro bono, if you will, to make sure that people are pushing the right direction. And I'll just tell them gently, look, it doesn't look like you have a case. Classically, somebody stopped short and I hit them in the rear and they stop. I'm so sorry. You don't have a case, but let's prepare these no-fault forms. Let's get you in the direction of healing, because that's really the whole point.
Absolutely. It's getting people better. And I'll talk to Dr. Fundaro for a couple of minutes. Do all doctors take no fault?
No, as a matter of fact, many primaries don't want to be involved in the no-fault forum.
So your regular medical doctor, primary, meaning like your primary care physician, might not even take
might
any?
not. They might. Then they'll refer to probably to a specialist like yourself, or to a chiropractor, or to a physical therapist, or to an orthopedist.
It's funny. We've done this show for a few months now, and we've gone over what the neurological exam is. So I talk about looking at people's memory, looking at their eyes, testing their reflexes, testing their strength, and doing mostly diagnostic testing as a neurologist. So we do all the diagnosing type things. And then we use ancillary tests. We said X-rays, MRIs, CAT scans, EMGs, nerve tests to try to define the process. But a lot of people don't know what a chiropractor does. So maybe, and we have a few minutes left, you could just, for a couple of minutes, what the science of chiropractic is and the
Well,
art
sure.
of
Sure.
chiropractic.
Okay, so first, when a patient comes in, particularly a no-fault patient, we take a history, just like you do in your office. We do kind of a multifaceted examination. We do an orthopedic and neurological exam. We check reflexes, like you do, and sensation. And we do orthopedic testing to try to find out what's causing the problem. And once we determine that we feel comfortable with what's going on and we've ruled out fracture and so on, then we'll do a therapy. We'll do electric stim or ultrasound or both, a hot pack and so on, and then we'll give an adjustment.
So when you say the electrical stim, that sounds very much like what a physical therapy office
Yeah,
does
there's
too.
definitely overlap. I mean, we like to think that we're the specialists of the spine and the other joints belong to the physical therapist, and that's fine. But as chiropractors, we do adjust other joints. We do adjust carpal tunnels, we do TMJ.
And that's the wrist, the jaw, right.
Exactly, and so on.
How often do you see someone?
Typically 2 to 3 times weekly for the first 4 weeks, and then 2 times weekly for the next 4 weeks, and so on. And then as needed.
Is it important for the person to be involved in their own care at home?
Oh,
Exercise programs, eat, massage, or is it just coming to your office for 2-3 hours a week is enough?
No, absolutely. When we feel they're ready, we give them a home exercise program. We give them special stretching that we want done. We don't just hand them a sheet because there are exercises and stretches on that sheet that I don't think are good for them, and it's very personalized in that respect. And a chiropractor adjusts the segments of the spine, to get back to what you were saying before, to try to relieve pressure on the nerves.
So really to summarize just a little bit, so the medical aspect of this, the chiropractic, the whole issue with regard to medication treatment is really to get someone better.
Absolutely.
And as we said, as we started, no fault, somebody has to be at fault. So somebody's at fault, someone's not, maybe it's proportional, but someone's at fault. So not everyone is having a settlement or a claim or a jury verdict. They need care.
No.
And New York State, as many other states in this nation, has really decided to help people who were in accidents, traumatic injuries, in order to get back to where they were. And that's really, I think, the most important thing that I want to impart here with this marvelous group, and I want to thank you all for coming, is that we want you to get better. And we're going to get you better by getting you to the right people, whether it's a neurologist, orthopedist, physical therapist, chiropractor. And the person that helps navigate you most through this, and it's not your doctor. No matter how much we think we know, we don't know the system that well, is usually through an attorney. Whether you were right or wrong in the injury, as Mr. DeStefano mentioned, at this point we're able to get the benefits that are due you. So with that, I want to say thank you, and hopefully none of us are in any car accidents or involved in anything like that. But if you are, just to know your rights is so important.